All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all so much for attending this Thales Press webinar entitled To Read a Work of Art to Enter Another World with Anthony Esolen, Distinguished Professor of the Humanities at Thales College. For anyone who does not know me, my name is Winston Brady. I'm the director of Thales Press. The goal of these webinars is to create an opportunity where students and teachers can come together and share ideas that make learning a joyful and engaging experience. As far as logistics and housekeeping details, a recording will be made available via our Thales Press YouTube channel and our Thales podcast entitled Developing Classical Thinkers. Please subscribe to those two mediums in order to get updates about new content when we publish them. Q&A will also follow after the presentation. I'm now going to give a brief introduction to our speaker, Dr. Anthony Esolen, and then turn the webinar over to him. So originally from northeastern Pennsylvania and the grandson of Southern Italian immigrants, Dr. Anthony Esolen received his A.B. in English literature from Princeton University and his M.A. and Ph.D. in Renaissance English literature from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Dr. Esolen has been a professor of literature and humanities for 35 years and is the author or translator of more than 30 books, which include a range of English translations, analyses of culture, literary and biblical criticism, meditations on modern education, meditations on the Christian life, and original poetry. He and his wife also published a web magazine dedicated to language, music, poetry, and classic films called Word and Song. Thales College, where I'm filming here today, is honored to have Dr. Esolen serving on the faculty in a dynamic role that includes teaching and public lectures, as well as publishing work for Thales Press. Dr. Esolen, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to share your expertise with our audience. So, Dr. Anthony Esolen, everyone.
Thank you, Winston. Welcome, everybody. When you mentioned that business about the University of North Carolina, I'm reminded of what then Senator Jesse Helms said about the proposal to fund a zoo for the state of North Carolina. He says it's not necessary. All you needed to do was to build a fence around the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Anyway, I'm honored to be here with you, and welcome to everybody, teachers and students and parents and everybody. I'm going to show you only 4 works of art today, 2 on one subject, 2 on another subject. The title of my little address here is, how to read a work of art, how to enter another world. And I have in mind the kinds of things, I have in mind a couple of things. First, how it's best to introduce young people to art and music. And second, how it can fit well in the program in the humanities, such as you have at Thales College, whether we're talking about literature or philosophy or history and politics and so forth. I think that art and music, but today's lecture's on art, is really powerful and underused. I don't mean to suggest that we just going to use art as a tool for other purposes. That art is great in its own right and ought to be addressed and honored in its own right. But it is dynamite, and it is kind of, I think, a missed opportunity for us all as educators not to use dynamite when we have it. And in any case, first I'd like to suggest that when you begin to introduce young people to art, you keep to a minimum the technical language, okay? That just goes in one ear and out the other. We, at a program in Western Civilization at Providence College many years ago, we decided to have one of the music professors give a lecture on Johann Sebastian Bach. And she did, and we never invited her to do so again because it was all loaded up with technical terms from the history of music, and it really didn't approach the students in a human way, and it had nothing to do with our program. Okay, so I do not recommend that sort of thing at all. So having said that, I would like Winston to show us the first picture, which will be that of the Annunciation by Fra Angelico. Okay, wonderful picture. Now, uh, when we first encounter a work of art, regardless of whether we're professors or just kids, our first encounter with it, I think, has to be in a deeply human way, right? Let's suppose you are showing this to young people. You do not want, I think, to say, well, what does this symbolize? You don't want to do that at all. The first approach must be human, okay? And so we ask, what is it that we notice here about this painting? Okay, so this is terrific. Let's just react to this in a human way first of all right? What have we got here? This is a painting of the Annunciation, so the angel Gabriel, whom you see on our left here, um, is greeting Mary with that salutation, "Hail, full of grace. You will bear the Son of God, the Son of the Most High." And Mary says, "How can this be?" And the angel explains, "You will be overshadowed by the Holy Spirit." And Mary says, "I am the handmaid of the Lord, be it done unto me according to thy word." At which moment, Christians believe, the word is made flesh and dwells among us. So this is the moment not just of hearing news, but of the coming into the world in the flesh of the Son of God. That's what's being portrayed here by Fra Angelico. Well, now let's notice some things before I tell you where this painting is and how you might see it with your own eyes in the place where it was hung. Um, let's pick out some things. First, these are things I think that students will notice. First, you've got apparently a garden in no particular order here. You've got a garden and trees beyond the garden, rather large trees, including that skinny tree on our left at the top, a cypress tree. And you've got a garden, but it doesn't seem to be planted in any particularly fussy way. It's full of grass and ferns and apparently wildflowers. Okay. And there's a fence. It's a wooden palisade fence. It's not a stone fence, not a stone wall, but a wooden fence. Apparently, then it goes all the way around the garden. These are things to notice. There is also a strange window in the door, just on on the far side of Mary there. And through that window, through the bars of that window, we can see a part of the area beyond this enclosure, right? The world beyond. You've got Mary sitting on a wooden bench, a very plain wooden bench. There's not a whole lot of fuss here. It's a humble seat, perhaps with only three legs. We see two of them. Um, she is seated here while the angel has apparently approached her through the columns, two of the columns of the portico, right? From our left-hand side, we can tell that he's done so because Fra Angelico has painted his wings, the one that's closest to us, partly obscured by the one column, and the other in front of that middle column. So he's come between these two, um, an important thing. Evidently, we're still noticing things here. Ask the kids, ask the students, what do you see? Uh, do you see shadows? Well, yeah, Mary is casting a shadow um, to her right, our right, as we look at her, behind her. So evidently, the light is coming from the garden, the direction of the garden. The angel Gabriel is not casting any shadow. We see that the right-hand sides of the columns are vaguely shadowed. Otherwise, all is bathed in light. And the general impression that we get from the painting is that it is, in fact, full of light. Um, I hope that the students will notice that we've got certain colors that predominate. The dark green, blue green of the grass and the woods, it seems to be echoed by the blue, a deeper blue of Mary's robe that's traditional to portray Mary in blue. Um, the angel is dressed in a kind of pink, kind of salmon color, okay, um, with gold embroidery across the chest. Uh, and those wings, which are crazy, in a rainbow color, uh, 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 a veritable panoply of colors there. And I'm told, I didn't notice this when I saw the painting in person, but that if you approach the painting from one side or another and the light strikes in different direction, you can see the the angel's wings sparkle because Fra Angelico had crushed shiny stones like mica and lapis lazuli, which is what they always use to get deep blue, had crushed them into the paints while he was painting the colors in the wings so they would catch light from different angles. Really very quite a remarkable effect there. Anyhow, um, we notice more things, okay? Notice, for instance, that the angel has his hands across his breast, right, and is leaning forward, and that gesture is almost identical in Mary as she has her hands placed across her bosom and she is leaning forward towards the angel. Um, if you were to ask which of these two is giving something and which is receiving something, you would probably naturally say that the angel is giving something and Mary is receiving something because the angel is clearly moving towards Mary. Um, what is the angel doing? What is he in the middle of doing? We notice that his knee is bent. Okay. Um, now, this may be, we can think of it as, Fra Angelico has caught him in mid approach, right? And yet we don't really walk that way. That seems not just to be an approach, but also in mid act of falling to one knee at least in a gesture of honor to Mary. Eh, right? He appears like he is about to kneel on one knee. Um, she is seated. She does not appear to be about to move at all, except to lean forward. She is leaning forward, looking at the angel intently, listening to the angel, okay, and accepting the offer that the angel makes. Um, the angel, if you will ask students, if you may ask which one of these two figures is portrayed by the painter as more important than the other. Now that's kind of strange, right? But you've got the angel and the wings, which are glorious. You've got that gold trim across the chest, and yet the angel is positioned lower than Mary as we're looking at it, right? They're not at the same level. Okay. That's an interesting thing. You might ask them then about the columns. What's going on with them? We've got these columns. Does it look like an ordinary house? No, it doesn't really look like an ordinary house. Would you say that it looks like a rich house? Well, yes and no, maybe, right? Certainly the columns, marble columns, suggest wealth, and yet there's nothing else in the painting that suggests wealth. Nothing except for this portico. We don't see any fancy dress. We don't see any fancy things hanging about. Um, it all looks pretty plain, pretty austere. Yet the capitals on the columns, you ask the students, are they fancy or are they just simple and spare? These first three in front look pretty fancy. You needn't inform them what they are yet. Notice that they are is important. Well, these other columns behind the angel do not have that same kind of capital. Okay, so what's going on there? And what's that window all about? Um, Look at it. Do you find the painting beautiful? If you find the painting beautiful, why? What is about the colors that stand out? All ways, in other words, to react to a painting, to react to a work of art in a deeply and immediately human way. Okay, and only then, right? I think it is appropriate then to start to mention things that move us beyond our own position into what I've called another world, right? It's another world because it uses language that we perhaps no longer have. Okay. Um, and here I think you do need to do a little bit of work to help the students out. You say, listen now, that garden is enclosed, and here's where it comes from. It comes from, in fact, the Song of Songs. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. It's the Song of Songs. It's this great, glorious love song in the Bible. And so Mary is put inside this enclosed garden. Um, it's a garden full of riches that belongs to the spouse, not to the wide world, but to the spouse in an intimate way. A garden enclosed is the womb of Mary. Um, how about that? And they would say, well, would everybody have known that, or is this just something odd that you're throwing at us? And you'd say, no, 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 everybody knew it. They would have said, oh, yeah, because they'd have seen it before. You were entering here into a world with a very different language from yours. You see the wild flowers there. They're just pretty flowers in a garden. You'll say, well, maybe not. Maybe they are wild lilies. And wild lilies would symbolize the purity of Mary, her chastity. What about that? If you have to have the garden enclosed, why do you put a wooden fence? And look how plain that fence is. You can see the nails. You can see the nails, 3 nails in each wooden post of the fence. It's a palisade, a wooden palisade. Why would it be wood and not stone? Gee, who is that person that Mary is going to bear? Well, you say, well, she's going to bear Jesus. Well, what will happen to him? You can get into these things without, I think, um, getting deep into theology or arguing about who Jesus was. We were talking about what these people who received this painting from Fra Angelico, what kind of world they did live in. And they'd said, well, yes, how wonderful that that fence is made of wood and that there are nails in it. Because we know what's going to happen. You see, this painting looks so peaceful and pretty, so beautiful, and yet there is that quiet testimony to the dreadful thing that's going to happen. There's the crucifixion of that child that she's going to bear. What about that window? Well, what happens when light passes through a window? And here again, you're trying to, you do have to help the students out because they're not going to be used to thinking about these things, right? Um, and of course, we have to find them out ourselves too, because we don't live in this world that uses this language. Light passes through a window without breaking the glass. So, they said, did the power of God enter the flesh of Mary to make it bear fruit in Christ without breaking the flesh. And so the window there is testimony to what is going on right now. Okay. Um, and there's much else that I could mention here, right? The the acanthus plant that is the gives us the capital, the fancy capital is acanthus leaves. That's a flowering bush that bears thorns. Um, and then maybe some of the students will be able to volunteer. Oh, thorns. I see. Thorns. Yes. Um, uh, that's is there as a kind of quiet witness to the reality of what's happening. The wood of the door and the stool that Mary is sitting on, very humble stool, suggesting her humility, but that wood and the uprights of the palisade, that I think they also come together in our mind. They refer to that wood that is going to be carried by that child that she's going to bear. Okay, and it's all here, but it's here in a quiet, simple, peaceful way. Now you can tell the students a little bit about where the painting is. It's in a convent, the convent of St. Mark, and the friars who lived in that convent um, saw the paintings of Fra Angelico every day because he painted a painting of the crucifixion with a saint beneath in adoration in every single one of the monks' cells, painted into the plaster on the wall, fresco painting. So called fresco because you do it while the plaster is still fresh so it can absorb the paint. And this painting of the Annunciation, they would have seen as they walked up the steps. Uh, so they would be approaching it from below and seeing it from above, and it kind of uh, makes it as if you were looking upward into a scene where the lines of that porch there seem to go vanish into the distance, onward and upward. Absolutely glorious. Okay, now you there what we do is supplement our natural human reactions with some knowledge of uh, what the what the language of the painting is, and then the next thing, the third thing, is to look at the painting again, knowing these things, having had these human reactions, having been instructed in a bit of the language, to behold it again now. Um, Now with some understanding, but also I think with a more open attitude of wonder, because you don't want to stop with just technical details about something and say, well, now I understand the painting. Those are just themselves a step towards wonder at the glory of this painting. When you encounter it first, you say, that's a beautiful painting, but I don't really know what's going on. Afterwards, you encounter it and say, this is a glorious painting. This painting speaks truth. And here's how it does it. And again, I'm saying these things regardless of what religion you happen to profess. Okay. Now, um, this was painted in the 15th century, before the upheavals in history of the 16th century, when the Christian world was um, divided by the Reformation. And uh, not only that, but I mean, the whole world is in an upheaval in the 1500s because of some things that have happened in the 1400s and late 1400s, namely the discovery of the New World, right? I mean, it's 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 a tumultuous century, the 1500s, and so let's go to a painting done by a man named Tintoretto of this same scene, okay? But now it's after um, the upheavals of the Reformation and the Catholic response to it in the Counter-Reformation. It's after the discovery of the New World. It, uh, it's it's in a time of more tumult and perhaps less optimism about human things. So let's go to the painting of the Annunciation by Tintoretto. That's the Annunciation. You say to the students, now this, okay, could never have been painted in the 1400s, never been painted. No one would have thought of such a thing. They couldn't conceive of it. Also, we've got an oil painting here, and oils were invented in the 1400s. Fra Angelico's painting was done with tempera, which made out of eggs. Oil painting allowed for all kinds of different effects, including deliberately painting areas that are very, very dark. Okay. As soon as you see a painting like this with a lot of darkness, you can tell the students that this is an oil painting, could not have been done before 1500, and nobody would have done it. Okay. So that's like an early bound to when this is possible. This is the Annunciation. And again, we start asking the students, we start saying, what do you notice about it? What do you see? And let's see. Let's take a close look, right? We see a column in front, but it's partly or mostly ruined. We see mortar exposed over brickwork in front. We see what looks not like a doorway, but a great gaping hole in the wall where a door should have been, because we do have the lintel above. We see that. We also, though, have apparently empty space above that lintel because these angel boys are flying in through it. Look at the ceiling here. Okay, this is not the spare, calm, peaceful portico that you saw in the Fra Angelico painting. That ceiling is a coffered ceiling. That's very fancy, that ceiling work. But what color is it? It looks dark. Is that because of smoke? Is it dingy? Look at that. There's this big curtain, big red, deep red purple cloth hanging from above. That's royal stuff. That doesn't look like anything that a peasant would wear, right? You've got, though, the same time you've got that, you've got uh, 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 right by that open gate there, you've got a chair. It's a chair stuffed with straw, and it looks like the straw is coming out the bottom of that chair. That chair is needs repair. Okay. Mary has a book in her lap, which she has apparently dropped because her arms are moving away. Notice that her arms are not moving forward. She is leaning backwards, and her arms are moving away in a kind of astonishment. You've got a really fancy parquet floor there. Look at that. And yet, if you ask the students, is it clean? Is it in good repair? They should say, well, not exactly. It looks like it's been scuffed. It looks like it's been exposed to the elements. So there's royalty here and great expense at the same time that there is ruin. That's weird. That's odd. And then look what's on the left of that wall. It's a whole bunch of wood. It's the wood that you saw in Fra Angelico's painting, but It's sticks. It's boards that have been smashed. Um, and you may just be able to see, if they look closely, say, do you see somebody else in this painting besides Mary, the angel Gabriel, and those um, angel boys? Yeah, there's a man over there on the other side of the wall, and he's got what looks like a large carpenter's tool. And that man, then you'd say, well, if you ask them who is that, well, it's probably Joseph the carpenter. But look at what he's got to work with there. It looks like the whole world is in ruins. It's a royal world in ruins. And beyond Joseph, it doesn't look like you've got a city. You've got a bare, bald mountain. Um, this is in many ways, this is a shocking painting. And the angel Gabriel's coming through that hole in the wall. And this time he is not about to kneel. He is flying and he's gesturing upwards towards, you ask them, what else we got here? What other creature? Well, it looks like a dove. And the dove is flying downwards at Mary. Does it look violent? And they say, well, yes, it does. It does look violent. Does it look like Mary is going to get killed? No, it doesn't look like that, but it does look violent. And is the dove, who is a symbol of peace, is the dove part of the violence? And they say, well, yeah and no. But yeah, because it's flying down, it's swooping down like a bird of prey. Um, but does it look like a realistic dove? And they will say, well, I hope they will say, no, it doesn't. It's very strange. If that's a dove, that's the strangest looking dove I ever saw. What about the light that seems to come from that dove? Is there a special ray of light that you notice? And then I would hope that they would notice that there is one that goes from the eye of the dove straight down to Mary's bosom. This is the Annunciation and Mary in some fear. Look at the expression on her face. Her mouth is open. It's shock. Mary is troubled when the angel says these things. She doesn't know what he means, and he has to explain. But this painting is really quite radical, quite violent by comparison with the other, isn't it? And now you ask, why? What's happening? Okay. Let's try now to get into this world. Okay. In this world, the world of Tintoretto, and for Angelico, of course, he would look at this and he would say, I don't want to paint something like that, but I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. The world is in ruins. It's a great world. It's been made by God. And what human beings have done to it is that you see. Okay. And this world needs to be rebuilt. But human beings by themselves, they can't do it. If you looked at this world out there and you said, gee, we're the ones who made it this way. Can we remedy it? It looks like in the painting that the answer is no. Okay. Therefore, the power of God must enter into this world, and it enters in what looks like a violent and dramatic way. Okay. Really dramatic. And maybe the older students, you might venture to ask, why is it important that the angel Gabriel is flying through that open doorway where a door should be? Okay. It's Tintoretto's redoing of that window that you saw. Remember, light can go through a window and not break the glass, so does the power of God enter into the flesh of Mary. And here you've got the power going through, and there's no glass. It's all been broken, and the power is entering in this dramatic and perhaps even violent way. Um, this is uh, this is a world here of tremendously powerful feelings. Um, a world in which you don't necessarily meditate peacefully upon the power of God, but you call upon that power dramatically to enter the world and take it by storm, to take it by force. And this by the humblest fellow you ever wanted to meet, Jacopo Robusti, called the little die maker. His nickname, Tintoretto, the little guy who fooled around with making his own paints. Humble, humble man, really good fellow. And yet, look at this. It's amazing. Okay. Um, let's go to our third work of art, wooden sculpture by Donatello of Mary Magdalene. Boy, she doesn't really belong in that space where you see her portrayed here. This is Donatello's sculpture. We're back now in the 1400s. A wooden sculpture that was painted by the master himself, of Mary Magdalene portrayed as a very old woman, still penitent for her life, of being a prostitute, as was traditionally believed, um, and repenting of that. She met Jesus. She's identified with the woman who anoints Jesus's feet and dries them with her hair. She weeps. Well, look at this. And ask the students, what do you think about this? What do you notice about it? And they may say, it's not clear to us whether that's all her hair or rags that she's wearing. It may be that she's naked under all that hair. But the hair looks like clothing and the hair looks like rags. What else do you notice? Well, her arms are strong. For a lady, they're very strong. They don't look like a woman's arms. They look like a man's arms. What else do you notice? Well, the arms are kind of not in keeping with the rest of her frame, which is emaciated, because you can see her collarbone, and the chest underneath the collarbone is kind of sunken in. What else do you notice? Well, her eye sockets are sunken in. Well, okay, all right, fine. How does that happen to a person, that your eye sockets are sunk in? And they may well answer, well, it's because you've lost all the fat on your body. Well, how does that happen? You're fasting. You don't eat. Okay. Yet, what else, oh, young people? Does this woman look like a weakling? No, she doesn't look like a weakling. Does she look like a witch? You may get some interesting answers to that. Um, does she look as if she once were beautiful? What's the sculptor doing with that wood? And why do you have such bold strokes somewhere on it, right? Uh, as if he took his chisels and chiseled out things rather harshly. But then look at the arms and the biceps, and it looks there that he's polished everything to a fine, smooth polish. Why'd he do that? Okay. Um, all to get across, I think, I mean, there's a very startling sculpture to get across both the strength and the humility, the strength, and that giving up everything, as you still are weeping for your sins many, many, many years later, still penitent. Okay. Now, uh, We're going to go from this to a painting by my favorite painter in the world. I'm not saying he's the greatest painter in the world. I think he's one of the four or five or six greatest in the world, but he happens to be my favorite. And that's a fellow named Caravaggio. Caravaggio led a tumultuous life. He knew about sin. Um, and this is his painting of the penitent Mary Magdalene. And you can say to the students, listen, you see a painting that is dominated by dark colors like this, and the painter is able to give you the tiniest details. Say immediately, that's an oil painting. And so again, we approach this in a human way. What do you feel when you look at this? Um, I feel very sorry for the woman. Um, if you look very closely, you will see one tear on the side of her cheek. Okay, only one tear. Um, how's she dressed? Well, she's dressed in a pretty fancy way. What kind of woman dresses like that? Ooh, there we might touch upon some interesting answers. Someone might say, well, a lady, a rich lady, or someone who has earned her money in not a very nice way and is wearing clothing that you can afford because you've earned your money in that way, but also clothing that's meant to attract. You're a kind of high class sort. What do you think? Does she seem concerned about her clothing? No, she doesn't. What about that stuff on the floor? What is that stuff on the floor? They say, well, it looks like a string of pearls. String of pearls. Okay, so where do you wear a string of pearls? Usually around your neck. But the string of pearls then has to be a circle. Is that string of pearls circle? No, it's not. It's a strand of pearls. If it had been a string of pearls, it's been broken or its clasp has been broken. There are pearls beyond it too. Well, how did this string of pearls get broken? We aren't told, but it's a question to ask. What is that jar in front of her? It's a glass jar and it's almost full of a substance that can't be water. Why can't it be water? Because if it's water, we'd be able to see through it partly. So it's thicker than water. What's thicker than water? Oil. Oil. Okay. Well, do you suppose you would put any old oil in a jar like that? Oh, no. Only really fine oil. Olive oil. Really fine. Why would a woman have oil there? Why would this woman have oil? What would she do with the oil? Well, maybe you wipe it on your face to make your face clean and make it shine. Or maybe the oil is perfumed, so use it as a perfume. What about the gesture of her hands and her arms? And now I would hope that the girls might respond. Well, it looks like the gesture that we saw Mary have in the Annunciation painting. You're right. It is like that. But it's a little bit different, isn't it? Because it's not pressed against her bosom. It's sort of in front, and she's looking down into it. What do you see in that space between her hands and her bosom? What's there? And they'll say, well, only the clothes are there. And then maybe somebody else says, nothing is there. Nothing is there. If a woman is seated like that and holding her arms like that and looking down at them, what do you expect to be there? And then maybe somebody say, well, it's a child. But there's no child. There's no child where a child should be. How about her hair? Look at the strands of hair on her left shoulder, which is right to us. They look just careless there. They're not done up. Maybe she's just washed her hair. Does she seem to care about it? No. Remember the Mary Magdalene, you saw their hair is down to her knees, down below her knees. This is long hair too, long auburn hair. It's a beautiful color. And yet it looks like it doesn't matter to her anymore. And now you can say, okay, everybody, this is what's going on here. Now we want to try to speak the language that Caravaggio spoke. This woman is going to take that jar of oil and she's going to break it and she's going to anoint the feet of Jesus with that oil in that alabaster jar. And she's going to anoint his feet with that oil and her tears. And she's going to dry his feet with her hair. And the people watching it are going to say to themselves, if this man really were a prophet, he'd know what kind of woman is doing this. But he would read their thoughts. And he knew what kind of woman was doing that. Kind of woman who is now right here before your very eyes is a human soul coming to life. And she's going to expose herself to the contempt of those people, and she doesn't care. And she's going to weep, and she's going to break that jar of oil, and she's going to beg forgiveness for her sins. Her whole world will have come crashing down about her. And that is what you see quietly, but also dramatically, in the tools of her trade, which are just scattered carelessly, even broken, on the floor. And there she is, a rather busty woman of a kind, I suppose, there have always been, but not of a kind that there have always been, because this woman is just on the edge of being purified, just on the edge of holiness. And now when you approach the painting, having learned to speak a little of the language of Caravaggio, who was himself a notorious sinner, now you say, my gosh, this is one of the most amazing things that I have ever seen. And we're moved not to say smart aleck things about it. We're moved to wonder at it far more than when we just approached it for the first time. So it's 10 to the hour, and I have some time for questions. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
Thank you, Dr. Esolen. Really fascinating discussion from start to finish on how to intently gaze upon and wonder about great works of art. Speaking on behalf of everyone attending here, really enjoyed the time and can't thank you enough for spending an hour with us and giving us basically a guided tour through the Renaissance.
Thank you, Winston, and thank you, everybody. I hope to see you again.
And for Thales Press, I'm Winston Brady. Until next time, stay classy and stay classical.